Okay, so last week we got the user manuals for the academic vocabulary references, and I think most of you have had time to look over them a little bit and think about how beneficial, what is it that we can use these references for. I will mention, last night the kindergarten teachers met with the volunteers that are coming in to tutor. And I thought it was interesting, one of the comments that they made, because we were demonstrating, one being the teacher, one being the student, and so on. And one of the things we said was, find the evidence of whatever the question happened to be. And after we were done, a parent said, or a tutor asked, well, do they know the word evidence? And I thought about the vocabulary guide. Yes, we try to use that vocabulary that might be needed for OAA and so on. So.
And we've had conversations all year. I know Patty has said, like, problem and conflict, solution and resolution, using those interchangeable vocabulary terms. And I think this is a way that we can see the progression and make sure that we're all using the same vocabulary and those interchangeable parts and build that consistency that is needed.
I know Jenny and I were having a conversation once, and we were using two different terms. So for a math lesson, so we decided that it's a good idea to talk about that so that we could expose the kids to both terms that we were using.
No,
so.
I don't think you can overuse, because even still working with third graders, main idea, central theme, you will still run into a student every now and then who will say, what's central theme? As much as it's used, so the more the better.
I know Heather and I, from the assessment literacy aspect, with our those coming back up, we're going to be having that review of our working standards. And part of that was being able to
Look at the verbs.
yes, look at the verbs and looking at our DOK levels. And with this verb knowledge right here and being able to apply it to the rigor for our assessments coming up, this will be a good key and a good starting point.
It will also provide that vertical progression that goes on with your assessments, so that you're using those same terms when creating assessments, and you can have that discussion vertically.
Well, transferring over into my class and everyday life, because two of them were in a spat with each other. One of them came up and said, I said, so tell me what's going on. Well, the conflict is, so they used it. And I said, so what do we need to do? We need to come up with a resolution. So they were able to transfer it, at least those two are.
I thought it was interesting, the example that they gave for using the verb and verb phrases within a question, because it's really taking the kids deeper, where it said explain why 4 times a number can be decomposed into 2 equal add-ins. It's not asking them to complete the problem, it's asking you to explain why it's like that, so that goes very, it's deeper.
And that word explain, yesterday I did a practice a little OAA section, and the higher kids got the explain. And we've talked about it all year, but those little lower kids still say, what's it mean to explain? Please go back into the selection and tell me how you came up with that, and they still, 4th graders at the end going into 5th grade, still have trouble with the word explain. They just want to regurgitate information instead of trying to figure out how they actually came up with that.
So I wonder if those using the verb phrases will help our kids more than just using one word.
Mm-hmm.
That's.
I think it's important when you're creating your learning targets that you use the verbs and the phrases that are in the content standards so that they are exposed to that vocabulary.
And we've been working on word problems in kindergarten, and they had to explain how they knew whether it was addition or subtraction. We didn't necessarily care about what the answer was at that point, but what in that word problem told them it was. So we pulled out in all and take away and those kind of terminologies.
If you were going to share this piece with someone, who do you imagine sharing it with and why? mean, we've shared a lot about it together here, but can you take it away from our table and share it with anyone?
I think also your colleagues in other subject areas, because social studies, science, even math have the same terminology, explain, give the evidence. I'm sure that some of them are aware of it, but if you're using it interdisciplinary, it would help keep it, the kids would see the connections.
I think I would share it with my parents so that they are encouraging them, use these words at home. Share it with the kids, because I know I've told the kids, okay, I've taught you this big word today. How can you use it? Use it through the day. Then come back and tell me, how did you use that word today in a regular, classroom kind of situation? And they feel important because you kind of tell them you learned a big college word today. And so sharing it with their parents and encouraging them to use that because like you said, some parents ask, do they know that word?
Right.
The parents are aware of these kind of things. And I think that's important, knowing that a lot of them don't come with some of the background knowledge. If they have a tool in their hand, because some parents may be like, well, what can I say? What can I do? I don't know. Well, here's a tool you can use.
I was just going to say more than just knowing the word, how to apply the word, because that's where a lot of the difficulty comes in. I mean, if you gave them a vocabulary test, they might be able to match, explain, or whatever, but being able to apply that knowledge to what they're reading is a different road to go down.
That's true. We see that even on the practice tests we've taken in preparation for the OAA. A lot of times you know that they know the content, because of things that you've worked on, but these verbs will trip them up if they don't really understand what's being asked.
Or if they don't use them, because we've seen that a lot too. They know them, they just aren't using them. So they know what explain means, but they don't do it.
But I think they know what it means, but when it comes to actually putting it in a written form and saying, how do I draw this information from what I just read, I think that's where they have to do it. It goes back to what you always say, Evelyn, you can't just do it isolated. It has to be within the context of what you're reading.
And I think this opens it up with using the verb phrases, opens it up to making sure that we understand it's not in isolation. We have to expand.
I think as a district, it makes us stronger because K through 12 is talking the same language.
Yeah.
Well, and all
So-
of this is we're talking higher level thinking skills. That's the key, is that we're having them think.
Which is where Common Core is trying to take us in the new generation testing and so on.
And I think, in primary grades, it's important not just to expose them to those, but, when they're using it, point it out to them. Because sometimes they don't realize, that when they're telling you beginning, middle, end, that's retelling. That they don't understand that is the same concept.
They don't automatically make the connection.
So I think we have to help them make that connection also, just point out.
Yeah, there are definitely things you have to tell them. Say this is the way it is, but then there's other things you want them to come to with their deeper thinking.
Well, another thing that I think about this is, it's referring back to the National Panel on Reading. And I think that it can help us evaluate how our time is spent. Is the way we're spending our time really the most beneficial when we look at the strategies that the National Panel suggests that we use? Are there things that maybe we need to eliminate? Are there things that we need to add as language arts teachers, as content area teachers, and look at some of those, maybe just really make sure, because there's only so much time.
Right. I thought it was interesting on the dumps and so on, and I know that we've heard a lot of this kind of thing, but it came back to me, just like alphabetized random word lists and so on. We, like you just said, we talk about I knowledge and things being out there in the middle of nowhere and stuff. just pulling them in. You just have to have those connections and stuff. And so I thought, some of those were interesting just to remind us that.
Reminds us that reading's more than just a little process of doing something remote, in a controlled fashion. If I do this, this, and this, that's why I always love math. If you do this, this, and this, you're going to get an answer.
Right.
That's not so in reading, but that's what kids think. They think if I do this, this, and this, or if I can put these in alphabetical order, we're okay. I mean,
Well, and if we look at the don'ts here, most of them are using them in isolation.
Right, right.
They're not application level, they're
Yeah.
lower level.
And we know that reading is all about making meaning, understanding, and.
Right.